Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Nathan, and today we are doing our 8th class overview for Dungeons& and Dragons 5th edition. Today we're going to be covering Paladin. Now, Paladin is one of my favorite classes. I originally fell in love with this class playing 4th edition all the way back in 2010, and it's still a very powerful and a very fun class, and it's kind of this flavor of this holy warrior um, ensconced in armor and dealing out the divine punishment of the gods. So, here is our agenda for today. I'll talk about the overview of the class and what I kind of believe the role of the core class is going to be. Then we'll go through all of the features of the core class from level 1 to 20. I've broken this out into 5 level sections just for the sake of organization. Importantly, again, we're only going to be talking about the core Paladin class. In this video, I will kind of go through the subclasses and talk about what they are and the general gist of each one, but I'm not going to dive into deep detail on any of those. Then I'm going to be talking about multiclassing the Paladin with other classes, and then kind of summarizing the Paladin core class and giving some ratings. All right, so class overview and role. First of all, the Paladin is a charisma-based half caster, and they are a prepared caster, which means that they know all of their spells, and at the end of each long rest, you can prepare a number of spells equal to half of your Paladin level plus your charisma modifier. Now, if I was going to kind of sum up the role of the core class, you are a frontline, durable damage dealer with some support abilities. The paladins, have heavy armor, generally very tanky, and can put out some healing and other things like that. Paladins are also pretty heavily incentivized to use strength in melee. Now, you don't have to use strength, but kind of the requirements for multiclassing as well as their natural propensity toward using heavy armor means that you're pretty heavily incentivized to use strength. And like the monk, the paladin is a naturally multiple attribute dependent or mad class. You're going to want a high charisma for a lot of your paladin features as well as the save DC of your spells. And you'll probably want a high strength or maybe even dexterity to kind of use weapons because paladins, again, are a half caster and are kind of a hybrid between a martial character and a caster. All right, let's jump in and talk about class features. Now, at level 1, Paladin's hit dice is a d10. This is the second highest hit dice in the game, and this is the same hit dice as fighters and rangers, but only behind the d12 of the barbarian. In terms of their proficiencies, you're proficient with all armor and shields. The Paladin is one of 2 classes that the core class gets heavy armor proficiency, the other being fighter. And a lot of clerics subclasses also give you heavy armor proficiency, but again, Paladin is one of those classes that gives you heavy armor proficiency at level 1. In terms of weapons, you're proficient with simple and martial weapons, so basically everything in the game. That isn't exotic and that kind of thing. If you want to use something that's exotic, obviously talk to your dungeon master. In terms of their tool proficiencies, they don't get any, and they are proficient in wisdom and charisma saving throws. In terms of their skills, they get to pick 2 from the following list: athletics, insight, intimidation, medicine, persuasion, and religion. And as kind of a holy warrior, I think these skills make a lot of sense. Generally speaking, thought as a paladin, probably trained in the same area as a cleric, but potentially had more of a martial background and that kind of a thing. Now, also at first level, paladins get a couple of other features. You get divine sense, and as an action, you can use this to detect the presence of like undead and fiends and that kind of thing. And you can use this number of times per long rest equal to 1 plus your charisma modifier. This is mostly a ribbon feature, but in the right campaign setting, can be really powerful. Like, let's say you're hunting down a vampire, and the DM's like, "Oh, they're disguised as one of the members of the town." Paladin can just go, "Up, divine sense. I can know who they are." Paladins also get the lay on hands feature, which will scale with their paladin level. They have a pool of hit points, basically equal to 5 times their paladin level. And as an action, you can spend any number of these to restore them to a creature that you touch. That can include yourself, or you can spend 5 of them to cure a disease. Now, the cool thing here is it only takes 1 hit point to get a creature back up from unconscious. So a paladin can very effectively act as an emergency healer, and will, as long as you're judicious about using these, you'll always have some available. All right, at level 2, paladins get a whole bunch of things. First, they get a fighting style. So, like the fighter, they have something that can contribute to kind of their martial concept. The fighting styles available for paladin are Blessed Warrior, which gives you a couple cantrips off the cleric list using your charisma as your spellcasting modifier. They get Blind Fighting, which was an option added in Tasha's, as was Blessed Warrior, actually. It gives you blind sense out to a range of 10 feet. You get Defense for +1 armor class, Dueling for +2 damage if you're wielding a weapon in one hand and no other weapons. They get Great Weapon Fighting to help with two-handers, and Interception and Protection to kind of help protect yourself, well, your allies in particular. Now, they also get Divine Smite, and this is one of the core features that makes a paladin, and one of the things that makes them really fun. So, what this does is when you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can spend a spell slot to deal radiant damage to the target. Now, this radiant damage is 1d8 plus an additional d8 for each level of the spell. So, a first level spell slot will do 2d8 radiant damage, and the damage is capped at 5d8, which is a fourth level spell slot. Importantly, you can still smite with higher level spell slots if you have them, but they'll still do that 4d8 base damage. And then finally, your smites will do an additional d8 radiant damage if the target is a fiend or undead. So that'll be 6d8 max against one of those. And this feature, you can use it as many times as you want per turn. You can use it on opportunity attacks. And this lets paladins burst down big, dangerous targets, and is a very powerful thing that they can do with their spell slots. Now, it may not be as efficient as using, an equal level spell in terms of damage from other classes, but generally speaking, the smites are better than any paladin spells in terms of damage. And the fact that you can output, one of them on each attack means that paladins can do a lot of burst damage when necessary. Now, this is pretty resource intensive because spell slots come back on a long rest for paladins. But again, when necessary, kill the big bad. Now, paladins also get spellcasting here as a half caster. They get 2 spell slots of first level, and they don't get to learn any cantrips. Their casting focus is a holy symbol, and like clerics, paladins can put their holy symbol on their shield. You can prepare a number of spells equal to half of your paladin level, rounded down, plus your charisma modifier, and your casting stat is your charisma modifier. Now, they have divine spells, and the general flavor of these, you've got support spells like Bless and that kind of thing. You've got some healing spells like Cure Wounds. You've got a few control spells, usually kind of generally directed more towards controlling aggro, but you also have some disables. You also have some unique smite spells. Importantly, these aren't divine smites, so you can actually stack a smite spell with a divine smite for a little bit of extra burst damage. And paladins are the only classes that get these smite spells out of the spells in the book. At level 3, paladins get divine health, and this is kind of a ribbon feature that just makes you immune to poison and disease. And you also get your sacred oath, which is your subclass. Now, all subclasses have tenets. These are kind of the things your paladin swears to do and abide by, and this is more of a ribbon and role-playing feature. And they also get Channel Divinity, which they can use once per short rest. All paladins generally have some kind of turning ability. It kind of varies from subclass to subclass, and then they have usually some kind of oath-specific use for their Channel Divinity. Also, all sacred oaths have a subclass list of spells. Some of these are not on the core paladin list, but you get 2 spells per spell level that are always prepared for you and don't count against the number of paladin spells you prepare. And you also get Harness Divine Power here, and once per long rest, you can spend use of your Channel Divinity. You recover a spell slot of a level no higher than half your proficiency bonus rounded up. Now, they also get an additional first level spell slot here, and let's kind of talk about what some of the sacred oaths are. So, we have the Ancient's Paladin out of the player's handbook. This is kind of one where you're sworn to an ancient power or nature entity. It kind of has a lot of flavor with that. And I should mention here, when you're assessing a paladin subclass, a lot of their features don't really come online until later levels. And so really one of the big things that you want to look at when determining how good a paladin subclass is are their spell list and their 7th level feature, which we'll talk about when we get there. The Devotion Paladin is kind of this lawful good. You're sworn to ideals. They've got some things they can do to imbue their weapons with holy power. Got the Vengeance Paladin, which is basically sworn to vengeance and can is really good at picking out a single enemy and destroying them. From Zenithars, we got the Conquest Paladin, which you're basically sworn to conquer people and strike fear into them and rule with an iron fist. More of a lawful, leaning toward evil kind of thing, to potentially. And then you've got the Redemption Paladin, which is basically the opposite. You basically forswear violence unless absolutely necessary. And then from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we got the Glory Paladin. You're basically sworn to do great deeds and achieve things and that kind of thing. And then the Watcher's Paladin is sworn to protect the world from otherworldly influences. Then from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, we've got the Oath of the Crown. You're basically sworn to protect a ruler of a kingdom. And then from the Dungeon Master's Guide, we've got the Oathbreaker Paladin. Now, this is one that's more intended for potentially NPCs or an evil paladin, but this is a paladin who has intentionally broken their oath and gone a dark way. At level 4, paladins, all they get is their first ability score increase or feat, and they follow the normal feat schedule for classes, so 5 total. Now, in terms of feats that paladins want, you are a little you're pulled in a lot of different ways. As a paladin, you'll probably want to increase your strength to help with your melee attacks, but you also really want a high charisma as a paladin. Additionally, you may want some kind of weapon feature to feat to help with your attacks, like Polearm Master if you're using a spear or another polearm. And you potentially also want the Warcaster feature so that you can cast spells with somatic components that lack material components if you're using a shield and a one-handed weapon. Although if you're going the two-handed route, you don't have to worry about that. At level 5, paladins get extra attack, and they also get their second level spells and their second level subclass spells. This is as much as the martial ability of paladins improve in terms of attacks, and like most classes that get extra attack, this is a big level. Now, in terms of their second level spells, they get a lot of good ones. There's things like Aid and Magic Weapon, and usually the subclass spells here are pretty good. I do want to point out Find Steed is a paladin only spell and is a very powerful thing. You can cast it once, and then you have this friendly horse, and you don't have to cast the spell again. And assuming your horse survives, it's like a permanent summon, and it is a really cool spell. And I think the idea of a paladin with their friendly horse is really cool. All right, at level 6, paladins, the only feature they get here is Aura of Protection, and this is honestly one of the most powerful class features in the entire game. What this does is it gives you an aura that extends 10 feet from you in all directions. And as long as you're not incapacitated, you and all friendly creatures within the aura get a bonus to all of your saving throws equal to your charisma modifier. And this is something where this will make you extra resilient just against all spells, and is one of the reasons why a lot of paladins actually will prioritize charisma over strength, just because of the strength of this feature for defense, not only for you, but also for your entire party. At level 7, paladins get an oath feature as well as an additional second level spell slot. Now, these features vary, but they're typically an aura of some kind, again with a radius of 10 feet, and it varies from subclass to subclass. At level 8, we get our second ability score increase or feat, again, probably bumping our charisma or our strength, or getting some kind of other quality of life feat for our attacks or our casting and that kind of thing. At level 9, paladins are now a they're now a 5th level caster technically, so that's your 3rd level spell slots, as well as your 3rd level subclass spells. And again, the 3rd level paladin spells are pretty good. I do find that a lot of the time, paladins are going to use their spell slots to smite, but depending on what your subclass spells are and your other choices, there are some good ones on there, so make sure that you know what options are available to you. At level 10, paladins get another aura, potentially your 3rd aura, depending on if your subclass had one. It is called Aura of Courage. What this does is ourselves and friendly creatures within 10 feet of us can't be frightened while we're conscious. And in a campaign that involves fear, maybe even with undead, this is a really powerful feature, and really is going to help encourage your allies to stick close to you. If you have 3 auras at this point, you've got Protection, your class aura, and Courage, and you are going to be a beacon of hope and defense and survivability for your entire party. At level 11, we get an additional 3rd level spell slot, and we get Improved Divine Smite. Now, this is a wonderful feature. What this does is we get to deal an extra D8 damage on our weapon hits with all of our attacks, Importantly, they have to be melee attacks, so this doesn't work if you're using a bow. I don't see why you'd use a bow as a paladin except in a last-ditch effort if you couldn't get into melee or throw something. But yeah, really powerful free D8 radiant damage rider, and this makes paladins hit quite hard, especially like even if they're not going to smite. But this damage does stack on top of smite damage. At level 12, we get our third ability score increase or feat. And at level 13, we now get our fourth level spells. Again, a lot of powerful ones here. One of my favorite fourth level paladin spells is actually an improvement upon Find Steed called Find Greater Steed. It gives you an expanded list of summons you can get, potentially even something that flies like a griffin. One of the things I should mention on both Find Steed and Find Greater Steed is that while you're mounted on your steed, you cast a spell on yourself that only targets you, can also apply to your steed. So something like Shield of Faith, which bumps your armor class, could work, or a bunch of other interesting things. And paladins have a lot of cool self-only spells or single target buffs that you can apply and help with your steed. At level 14, paladins get Cleansing Touch. Now, this is the last core feature of the core paladin class other than spells. What this does is we can use our action to end one spell on ourselves or one willing creature that we touch. And we can use this number of times per long rest equal to our charisma modifier. And this is a potentially very powerful dispel effect and helps paladins with kind of that support and protecting not only themselves, but again, your other party members. At level 15, all paladins get an oath feature as well as an additional fourth level spell slot. These are typically very powerful passive features, and one of the things I like about paladin is that not a lot of your features are active, so you have a lot of really cool passive buffs. It is important, since we got fourth level spells, these are the highest level slots we can smite with that'll deal that 5d8 radiant damage. Now we will eventually get fifth level spell slots, but if you smite with those, they'll still deal 5d8. At level 16, we get our fourth ability score increase or feat. And at level 17, we are now up to our fifth level spell slots, and we get our last fourth level spell slot, and we get our final dose of subclass spells, our fifth level spells at this level. At level 18, all paladins get our aura improvements. Now, this may not seem like a lot. The radius of all of our auras, like our aura of protection, our class aura, and our aura of courage, extend out to 30 feet now instead of 10 feet. Now, this is actually a big deal because it means that your allies don't have to stick so tight on you, and you can still basically buff them all of your auras. One of the potential disadvantages of a paladin is that if your allies want the bonus, they have to stay close to you, which means that enemies will have an easy time blasting your entire party with area of effect spells. So this is helpful in that regards and can help keep everybody safe and let the paladin and the party be a little bit more free with their positioning in combat. At level 19, we get our last spell slot, our last fifth level slot, and we get our fifth and final ability score increase or feat. And at level 20, we get our oath feature, which is the capstone of our subclass, and all of these function as the capstone of the respective class. Now, these are typically a once per long rest, very powerful transformation effect. Now, the effects vary, but they usually make you tankier and make you deal more damage. They usually will cost an action or a bonus action to activate, and they have varying durations from like 1 minute to an hour, and it depends on the transformation effect. The only one that doesn't have a transformation is the Redemption Paladin, and they get a passive here instead. And honestly, these features are super powerful, and if you're going to be a pure class Paladin, they are extremely worth getting. One of the cool things I like about Paladins is they get something that's impactful just about every level. And so staying as a pure class Paladin is something that's both very powerful and very fun, as you feel like you get a pretty fun and new bump each and every level. So let's talk about multiclassing the Paladin. Now, in terms of requirements, you need a minimum of 13 strength and 13 charisma to take a level outside of Paladin if you are a Paladin, or to take your first level in Paladin if you're not a Paladin. This is kind of steep, and this is our second very multi-attribute dependent multi-class after Monk. And so if you want to multi-class as Paladin, especially if you want to use something like Dexterity, you may have to sacrifice your Charisma because you'll still have to have that 13 Strength. And this is a reason why, again, as a Paladin, you probably want to go Strength if you want to multi-class at all because it's in your requirements. Now, if you take a level in Paladin and it's not your first class, you get proficiency in light armor, medium armor, shields, simple weapons, and martial weapons. Note that you don't get heavy armor proficiency, so if you want to get that as a multi-class character that uses Paladin, you might want to start Paladin at your first level. Now, in my opinion, what does Paladin multi-class best with? And I think Paladin goes best with Bard, Sorcerer, and Warlock. Now, these four classes, Paladin and then these three, kind of form this group of charisma primary casters that can all multi-class together pretty well. Now, both Bard and Sorcerer are full casters. Bard will give you more skills and support abilities. Sorcerer gives you really powerful defensive spells and meta magic. But what both of these classes do, if you take them with Paladin, is they will accelerate your spell slot progression, which means you'll get higher level spell slots sooner, which you can use to smite. They both, match your casting attribute, so you can scale your charisma and that kind of thing. And you can have a character that can deal out nasty spells and still have the aura of protection and all of that. Warlock, again, is also charisma based, and one of the main things that paladins like to do with Warlock, you take a single level of Hexblade, and what this can do is, with their Hex Warrior feature, it can let you attack with your charisma. So this makes your paladin go from being multiple attribute dependent to very single attribute dependent, and you can just focus on charisma. The RP of this is a little bit hard because you got to balance this devoted holy warrior with this. I've sworn this oath to a potentially not a nice entity, but mechanically it is very powerful, and it can be a lot of fun if you uh, reconcile those two story aspects. Now, it can also work pretty well with barbarian and fighter. Now, with barbarian, you can't cast spells while you're raging, but the rage can give you additional resilience, and you can use reckless attack if you're attacking with strength to get advantage on all of your attacks. And you can still smite while you're raging, and you get all of your paladin auras and that kind of thing. Uh, Fighter can be used if you want to enhance your martial prowess. You can get action surge for more burst damage, and you can smite on every attack. And you can pick up a subclass like Battle Master or something else, just to get a little more martial ability and utility on your attacks and that kind of thing. A lot of fighter subclasses can work. Even Eldritch Knight can be effective if you want to get more spell slots to smite with, and it also has those nice abjuration spells to enhance your defense. Now, I should mention other classes can actually work really well with Paladin if you have the stats for it. That said, because they usually require 13 strength and 13 charisma for Paladin, plus your other multi-class stats, it's usually not possible to make other ones work as well as the ones I've mentioned. It doesn't mean that you can't, and if you roll stats, you can do some crazy things like a Blade Singer Paladin. But with point buy, it is difficult to make these work as effectively as these other charisma focused casters. And again, I should emphasize that Hexblade 1 is a very common dip, and using any full caster multiclass with Paladin will accelerate your smite progression, which is a big deal for their damage. All right, let's go into our summary and ratings. Now, offensively, I actually give the core Paladin class a 4 out of 5 here. This is the same as I gave the fighter. And the main reason for this is because of the power of Divine Smite. You can pump out a lot of damage in a hurry with a Paladin, and you can make things that need to die. Paladins can also hit pretty reliably depending on your subclass, and you have a lot of buffs that can buff yourself offensively. So overall, very powerful offensively, and if you want to, lean heavier into this, you can add something like Fighter for Action Surge, or there are a wide variety of things to do. And taking other caster levels to accelerate your spell slot progression helps a lot. Now, defense. I also give the Paladin a 4 out of 5 on defense. They've got heavy armor and shields, which can help you deal with attacks. They've got Aura of Protection, which will help all of your saves, so you're going to be pretty resilient against spells. You've got a pretty massive pool of extra health in Lay on Hands. It'll be 100 hit points extra at level 20, which is kind of insane. You can use this out of combat to heal yourself or bring your allies back. The only thing that paladins really lack for defense are abjuration or defensive type spells, and you can get these pretty easily with a multi-class dip. And if you do that, you'll have an incredibly powerful defensive character, and that's the only reason why I don't give paladins a 5 out of 5 on defense. Now, control, again, I give the Paladin a pretty high rating here, a 3 out of 5. And this is because they have a pretty good selection of control spells, admittedly single target, but they've got things like command. They've some of the subclasses get hold person. You've got compelled duel to hold aggro if you want to use that. Um, and they have a lot of effects that can be used to debuff enemies and keep them focused on the paladin, who's going to be really hard to kill. And so, yeah, pretty good at control. Not as good as something like a wizard or a bard or other full casters, but you're about as good as you can get for a half caster role. Now, in terms of support, again, I give the Paladin a 3 out of 5 here. They've got some buffs to help their allies, and they've also got their really powerful auras, namely Aura of Protection, which you can use to help keep your allies alive. Also have that healing ability that contributes to their tankiness, but you can also, again, bring people back. Now they don't have, some of the features of more dedicated support classes, but they have a lot of support abilities, and a paladin is very flexible. And if the paladin stays alive, it's going to be really difficult for the party to die just because of the paladin's resources they can use to help. Now, skills. This is kind of the paladin's ability to do out of combat skills and that kind of thing. And I give them a 1 star because they don't really have anything other than their core class skills to help with this. You have some spells, maybe depending on your subclass, but usually paladins, they're not good at stealth and they're going to be best at talking to people because of their high charisma. So they don't have, again, nothing special here in terms of what paladins contribute skill wise. Now, complexity. This is the final one, and this category is a rating of how difficult the class is to play, with a 5 star being very complicated and a 1 star being very easy. Now, the reason the Paladin gets a 3 star rating here is because of their spell selection. The rest of the features are relatively simple, but the number of choices you have to make with which spells to prepare, which spells you want to use your concentration on. A lot of the Paladin spells are concentration, and you can only concentrate on one spell at a time. So it's important to use a good one. At the same time, you also need to balance your positioning, what spells you want to use offensively, when you want to heal allies. And just because the Paladin is so flexible, it makes them a little bit more difficult to play than a class like a fighter. So overall, yeah, the Paladin's a really cool class, my favorite, and I hope you enjoyed this overview on them. Hey, have you played a Paladin? Please let me know in the comments. I've played quite a few, and I really enjoy playing them. They can be interesting to RP, especially if you've got that lawful good, you can't have any fun type paladin. But I've seen a lot of ways to bring that to the table that's actually fun. So please, if you've had a fun experience with a paladin or any other thoughts on the class, please let me know in the comments. Our next class overview will be on Ranger. And again, my name is Nathan, and I will see you then.